Hi, welcome everybody to day 2 of Neuromatch 4. We're really happy to have you all back after a great first day yesterday with many exciting talks and discussions. And today we have another full program for you, which I'm really happy will start with a keynote lecture by Yuki Kamitani. Yuki is a professor at the Graduate School of Informatics at Kyoto University. And throughout his career, he has been at the forefront of using computational methods to decode the content of mental representations. During his time at Caltech with Frank Tong, he was leading the way in showing that we can use fMRI to decode mental representations from visual cortex. And I also particularly remember his work that came out in 2013, where he decoded the content of people's dreams while they were asleep. And I was a master's student at the time, and there were long email threads and lab meetings dedicated to this awesome paper. And he's recently been pushing this forward, also using methods from deep learning to work on this decoding. As you can see, Yuki's on Twitter, so feel free to tag him there and check out his work even more. And today he's going to be sharing more of his work on externalizing and sharing the neuroverse. So thanks for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for a nice introduction. I'm Yuki Kamitani from Kyoto, Japan, and it's a great pleasure to be part of this great event, and I really appreciate the people who organized this and finding me. Okay, so the background of this slide is my collaboration with Pierre Huyghe, French conceptual artist, and I'm going to tell you about what this image mean. Okay. And before I forget, I'd like to acknowledge my collaborators, the current and former lab members, and these core senior members like Horikawa, Shan, Majima. These people recently left the lab for better positions. Okay. And but this is the picture of Kyoto near my university. So I really hope you will visit Kyoto sometime soon once the pandemic is over. Okay. So although I'm a computational neuroscientist by training and I've been using machine learning, I'm primarily interested in more phenomenological aspect. Okay. And the left image shows image from Descartes. So, and he thought, visual input converges to a single point in the brain, which is a pineal gland. And he thought this is the gateway to the spiritual world or something. Okay. And the right image is a drawing by Ernst Mach, which depicts his first person view. Okay. And he thought, this kind of phenomenological experience is the primary thing, and the physical world is kind of construct from the mental experience. Okay, and I'm particularly interested in how the world, brain, the mind are linked, and when I explain these things, I often show this kind of image. Okay. And many neuroscientists think that the world is represented in the brain. So the brain has a model of the world, okay? But it has to go through this tiny bottleneck, okay? That's why I draw this bottle here. Okay, so in case of 3D perception, given 3D scene in the world, it has to go through 2D retinal image. And then in the brain, we create 3D view. And this is not yet, the exact copy of the world. Okay. And it's often rendered by more internal states like emotions. And such, model can be seen as an affective reality of the world. Okay. And when you output something like imagery or thoughts or intention, you have to go through muscles. And we have only about 600 muscles. And which are connected to very tiny portion of the brain, primary motor cortex. Okay, that's also a very tiny channel, right? So we have big world, big brain, but the communication between them is through very tiny channel. Okay, and I think this bottleneck of the body makes it difficult to study our experience as a whole. Psychophysicists can come up with nice, clever techniques to study subjective experience, but they often focus on very particular aspect of subjective experience, not as a whole. Okay. So again, the same picture, and although the brain is thought to represent the world, the brain and the world are very different. The world is made up of atoms, molecules, and skipping many layers, objects and agents, among others, while the brain is made up of neurons, spikes, networks, among others. But they somehow encode the world or the model of the world in peculiar ways, which is interesting for us, right? And many people are interested in how these very different entities can represent the world or experience. Okay, and if the world can be called universe, really the model of the world in the brain can be called neuroverse. Okay, so I came up with this word a couple of months ago, but recently, a few weeks ago, the word metaverse became very popular suddenly. So, and I'm a bit baffled, and I'm not sure I'm going to continue using this word. But for today's talk, let me use this word. Okay. And externalizing this neuroverse, bypassing the body, is, I think, very essential part of brain decoding. Okay. And I started what now is called brain decoding around 2005, and this is the first paper. And here we presented approach to use machine learning to analyze fine-scale neural representations, and this kind of very brute force method compared to conventional classic statistical or mathematical models. But this allowed us to make a very detailed predictions rather than explanation. And so those detailed representations have been thought to be beyond the reach of human neuroimaging or non-invasive methods. And our study, I think, put also encoding and decoding in broader context, which used to be limited to neurons or spikes, but it's extended to sensor space. Okay, and we also presented neural mind reading, and which was not popular at that time among the people in the field. And so here I show the basic idea of neural mind reading. And this decoder is trained to discriminate stimulus-induced brain activity pattern, in this case, left or right orientation. And this exact same model can be applied or transferred to decode internal states, okay, without any external stimulus to some extent. Okay, so this is because there's some shared representation for stimulus and there's subjective experience. Of course, not all brain regions share these representations. So we can look for those regions sharing or not sharing these representations. Okay. And using these ideas, my group has been working on several decoding methods. And the left shows visual image reconstruction by decoding local image contrast. So at that time, we succeeded reconstructing seeing images, but it was just a very crude signboard-like images, and it was 10 by 10, black and white, right? So, and we just predicted the contrast or mean contrast at each local region, and combined them to make a single image. And then in the right, I'm showing the dream decoding, but the contents we decoded was just semantic category, included in the dream report. Okay, so the left is about very low visual feature. Okay, the right is very high level semantic category. But maybe our experience is represented more by something in between, right? So, but those in between things are very hard to model physically or mathematically, and also even by words, it's hard to express. But we thought that DNN, especially the middle layers of DNN, which is trained for some vision tasks like category classification, may be useful. And these intermediate layers are, very, hard to describe, or nameless features, right? These middle nameless features may be informative to, express our actual contents. And I think, many of you are familiar with this kind of visualization of DNN or CNN individual unit. So by visualizing unit preferred images, we can look at the simple to complex and the local to global change of preferred images along the hierarchy of deep neural network. And a similar thing can be found in actual brain, like monkey brain. We can see this kind of progressively complex and global feature coding. So we can say, the DNN and the brain are similar, but many people are more interested in more quantitative comparisons. And so representative work include Dan Yamin's paper, which look at the monkey IT neural responses explained by deep neural network activity. And we were interested in a very similar thing around 2013. And but our approach is opposite, right? So the experiment is very similar. So we show many different images to the subject or the brain, and the same image, same sequence of image is given to deep neural network, and we compare the brain activity for each image and the DNN activity for each image. Okay, and many people are interested in predicting brain activity from DNN feature activity, but we did the opposite, right? And if you think DNN features are the physical image features of the image, we can think that these image features can be represented by the brain. Okay, so we call this feature decoding. Okay? And we look at the individual unit and given these different images, and this black line shows a true feature activity, unit activity, and this gray line shows the feature activity predicted from the brain. Okay, although the prediction is not perfect, on average we get reasonably good predictions. And in the right, we are showing the decoding accuracy, mean decoding accuracy for each layers of convolutional neural network, CNN, predicted from different brain layers, brain areas. Okay, so here we have brain's hierarchy, and vertically we have DNN's hierarchy. And the lower DNN, CNN layers can be better predicted by lower visual cortex, while higher layers can be predicted by higher brain areas. So we can see this lower to lower, higher to higher correspondence. Okay. And but the accuracy of prediction are variable across unit in each layer. But the accuracy is highly correlated between subjects. Okay, here I'm showing the unit decoding accuracy from subject 1 and 2, okay, for each deep neural network layers. And each dot corresponds to each unit. Okay. Although the accuracy varies a lot across units, they are highly correlated. So maybe those highly correlated and high accuracy features are biologically relevant. Okay. And here we try to quantify the hierarchical correspondence using what we call brain hierarchy score. And in most of our studies, we use AlexNet or VGG. And if you plot this brain area and versus DNA layer performance, here we can see nice correspondence between the hierarchical levels. So this gives a higher score. We call this VH score. So AlexNet and VGG tend to give very high hierarchy score, right? But for instance, the ResNet, which is very frequently used these days, and gives a good performance for object classification, shows very poor hierarchical correspondence between the brain and DNA. So yeah, this is a bit surprising, right? And we tested about 30 vision CNN model trained for object classification. And VGG, AlexNet, ranks high. And if we plot the VH score against ImageNet top 1 accuracy, which is object classification accuracy in general. And interestingly, we find negative correlation. So this means that high performance DNNs in computer vision tasks are not hierarchically brain-like. So maybe recent computer vision neural network models evolved very differently from the brain. Okay, so yeah, because of this, we often use VGG and AlexNet for our study. And using those models, we again tried image reconstruction. Okay, and again, given stimulus image or some imagery task, brain activity is measured, and from this, we predict DNN activity patterns. And we want to, translate this feature pattern into an image. Right? But it's been difficult when we started this. But although now we have several different methods. And so, but in this study, we took an optimization-based approach, and which is, starting from random image, we gradually change the pixel value so that this input image features become similar to the brain decoded features. Okay, and we optionally used this deep generator network, which is GAN. Okay, and this imposes some natural image prior, also reduces the dimensionality of the input. But this is not very critical to achieve good performance. But it helps to make it a little bit natural. Okay, and here I'm showing the reconstruction result using this method, and the left is the presented scene image, and the right shows the optimization process of the image. Okay, And this reconstruct does not reach the exact copy of the presented image, of course, but I think you can still see some basic object or maybe you experience the feel of the object. Okay, and some characteristic shape or texture may be reconstructed. Okay, so this is made possible by introducing those nameless middle layer features. Okay, so these are some result after the convergence. Yeah, so although, for instance, here at the pixel level, these are very different, but I think you can feel something like water or something like a bird here, right? And this looks very scary, spooky animal, right? But you can feel something similar. Yeah, this is almost totally different, but I feel like, I know what you mean or something, right? Just from this. Okay. And here I show the evaluation of reconstruction quality made by pixel correlation and human judgment when we increase the layer to be used to make that movie. Okay. So, and when compared with pixel correlation, as you increase the layers to be involved, the performance initially gets worse and a bit better, but generally adding multiple layers that do not help. But when humans judge, it monotonically increases, especially when adding middle layer, it improves the quality. Okay. And we use the exact same model to analyze the brain activity while the subject was imagining a shape, something like this. Okay. So subject remember this shape, but just the subject was familiarized with this kind of shape before the experiment. But during the scan, they were not shown with this kind of picture. Right? So not just blank screen, imagining this shape. And from that brain activity, we can reconstruct something like this. Okay. So this is not that good, high quality, but we spent over 10 years to trying this, and this is the first time to get something slightly meaningful. Right? Maybe you need to use your mind's eye, but I think you can see something like cross or square. Okay, and at the bottom, I'm showing a frame by frame representation. Okay, and here, so imagery is a bit challenging task, but maybe attention modulated perception may be more better reconstructed. Okay, so here the left is a stimulus consisting of these two images, and to one of them subject attended. Okay, so the stimulus was all the same, but by just changing the attention, the target attention, the reconstruction drastically changes. Right. You see this. Okay, so maybe this is kind of evidence for externalizing our mental state or neuroverse. Okay, and next, illusions. So illusions are interesting case where the neuroverse is different from the world, or the stimulus. Okay, and we use these illusions. So in the left, we have horizontal lines, but I think you can see vertical line, but this is illusory. There's no such line. Right? And in the right, although this red part is restricted within this cross part, but you see some color spreading beyond the cross region, right? This is called neon color spreading. And again, this is a stimulus. And if this is given to DNN and transformed back to the image, it gives something like this, mostly horizontal lines. But it's if this is stimulus is shown to the subject and the features are decoded from the brain and then transformed back to the image, that shows this illusory line. Okay, so maybe this is kind of externalization of neuroverse. Okay, and next, this neon color spreading, when reconstructed from stimulus features, color is restricted in the cross region, but reconstructed, from decoded features, we get this spread color. Okay. And we are also working on the decoding of dreams. So in our 2013 paper, we just decoded semantic categories. But here we try to make an image or movie. And we find some interesting shapes, but so far it's hard to find easy, clear correlation between the image content and the verbal report of dream contents. Okay, but we are now looking at the physiological and psychological correlates of these images. Okay, this is just preliminary ongoing project. Okay, and finally, I'd like to talk about generalizability of the decoder. Although I didn't tell you explicitly, all the models I have introduced were trained and tested within the same subject. And for reconstruction, we often spend hours, 5 hours, or even more than 10 hours to collect training data for each subject. So it's a lot of work. Okay? So, but it would be nice. Our life it will be easier if we can generalize, the decoder to other people. But generally, it's difficult because our decoding involves very fine-grained brain activity patterns, right? So, but there are recent methods for functional alignment, okay, and showing some exact same sequence of images or movies to different people, and then we try to find the conversion matrix, right? So while preserving the represented contents, okay? And we call this in neural code converter. Okay, so the idea is very similar to hyperalignment, but unlike hyperalignment, we just directly convert between subjects with single matrix. Okay, and if this works for very detailed image representation, we can do image reconstruction using other person's brain activity. Okay, so here we are interested in this source subject, and suppose this person doesn't have reconstruction model trained with many hours of experiment, right? But for this subject, there's data and there's trained reconstruction model. And we want to use relatively small amount of data just to find the correspondence, functional alignment. Okay. And actually, this project is presented by Junkai Hall, and he's presenting at this conference. So please talk to him if you are interested. I just show the main result. And again, the left top is a presented image, and the right top is the within subject reconstruction, which is the same as that presented before. And this across subject converter-based reconstruction is inter-subject deep image reconstruction. Although the quality is a bit degraded, it shows reasonably good reconstruction. And for comparison, I'm showing the anatomical alignment result. And I thought this doesn't work at all, but it works to some extent, but clearly worse than functional alignment. Okay, so basically, yeah, that's all. And to summarize, or reconstruction allows us to externalize the neuroverse by creating images that evoke equivalent brain states. Right. So, and I think this allows us to study holistic experience and the neural code of that. And the neural code converter allows for alignment and the reuse of neural data. And also, it will help us to understand shared or not non-shared neuroverse between individuals or between species. It could also be applied to brain-to-brain communication. Okay, you can convert someone's brain activity to another, and using that pattern, you can stimulate the person's brain. Then you may be able to communicate your thoughts or imagery or neuroverse. Okay, that's all for myself. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.
I will clap audibly on behalf of the audience. Thank you very much for a great talk. So I'm going to give people just a second to collect their thoughts and think of some more questions. And in the meantime, there are already a couple of questions that people posed during the talk, which I will just take a look at. And I will also link for the audience members to the Ho et al. Flash talk, which you can watch and which has further information on the last part of the talk. All right, let's look at some of the questions. The first questions are a little bit technical. So Brad asks, in the imagery experiment with the three shapes, so that was the cross and the plus sign, on what data did you train the classifier?
Oh yeah, that's a good point. So actually, we don't do any classification, and so we use completely different set of images between training and test experiment. And for training the image reconstruction model, we only used natural images from ImageNet, and we never used those simple shapes for training. So it's a kind of generalization to different image set.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's really extra impressive that you didn't train it on the, let's say, perception of those shapes by those same people. Another question, what did you mean by changing attention? Whether this is some kind of image pre-processing, which is asked by
okay, so actually, we are not very specific about that task. We just ask subject to showing the left image, for instance, and pay attention to one of them. Okay, and that's it. And many people experienced that the attended one become having higher contrast. And we had a separate psychological experiment to measure the effect of attention on the perceived contrast. And it shows just a 5-6% enhance of perceived contrast. It's not that large, but and actually that nicely matches to the amount of contrast difference in the reconstructed image.
And do you cue people to when they have to switch their attention to?
Actually, yeah. Although this video, played, this way, the actual experiment was single block is like 10 seconds or so, and at the beginning, the two images are shown, and the fixation color indicates which one to be attended, and then overlapping image was presented.
Okay, thank you. There's a question from Richard who has actually two questions. So let's just start with the first one. Where in the pipeline, from the image to the brain to the scan to the DNN to the reconstruction, do you attribute the distortions
Oh, yeah,
in the
that's a
reconstruction?
good question. So,
So-
our reconstructions are certainly distorted. Right? So, well, I think that, that's, if the feature is perfectly decoded, we see almost the exact same image. Right? So it comes from the lack of a feature decoding accuracy. Right? But then why we see this kind of distortion? Maybe interesting question. So there are some features which are better predicted from the brain. So maybe brain and maybe emphasizing that aspect. Right? But some other aspect may be ignored by the brain. So those difference may be reflected in the distortion, but we cannot tell for sure. So, but of course, some internal state. So we only look at effect of attention, but other states like emotion, something may affect. But to detect those, effect of internal state, maybe first we have to improve the feature decoding performance first, and then look at the difference.
Maybe a related question that I had myself. Do you think if you went from the fMRI, voxel responses to having single neuron recordings, of course, in humans, we can't really get those, but do you think there would be a big source to be the fact that you're using
that'll be
response?
Yeah, that'll be and also it depends on the DNN model, right? So and how it's trained.
Yeah.
And,
this is actually Richard's second question, so it's a perfect segue. He asks, to the extent that it would be in the DNN, like you just said, do you have thoughts on what changes you would make to either VGG or AlexNet if your primary goal would be to improve the accuracy of mind reading?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So to improve the feature decoding, well, one way is to improve the brain measurement, but another way is to change the model, right, that fits better to the brain representation. And the brain hierarchy score is one of our attempts to trying to find more brain-like models. And so we gain some insight from that, so we can design more, brain-like models probably. But so we haven't tested that, those new models. But potentially, we can. So the maybe the more shortcut would be to come up with a good DNN model that fits better to the brain representation.
Yeah. Thank you. We have many questions coming in. So the next one is from Shreya, who asks whether you can again explain a little bit how you did the anatomical reconstruction for the comparison in this across subject decoding.
So by anatomical, I just mean the the normalization in MRI field. So just using anatomical scan and using the brain landmarks, they do some nonlinear, mapping, right? So many people use that for group analysis. We just used that. So and by functional alignment, we align the brain or voxels based on the activity to the identical sequence of stimuli. Right? So, and that's not like one voxel to one voxel. So one voxel's activity is explained by combination of many voxels from another subject. Okay, so is that okay?
Yeah, thank you. A few more questions. Melvin asks, whether this reconstruction can be done for tasks that are not visual.
Yeah, actually, we're trying to reconstruct sound, and actually, there are some preliminary work of sound reconstruction for some limited domain of sound, classes. Right? But that will be possible. And other than that, I'm unsure. The motor. Yeah. Actually, motor parameters are just few, right? A few motor parameters can describe, for instance, position of hand or the tip of finger, right? So, and the vision is very high dimensional. So reconstructions can be more challenging, right? So so by essence, sound, some people, including us, are trying to reconstruct sound. But the problem with sound is that we don't have a good DNN model, and many DNN models are specialized for some sound domain, like speech or natural sound or particular language. So, and even in AI, it's sound mod. For instance, sound generator model are available, but I think no one has achieved very general sound generator. Right? So I think that's a current difficulty we have for general sound reconstruction.
All right, thank you. We have a few minutes, so maybe just one or two more questions. Brad is asking, what technology do you think is currently the most promising for brain-to-brain transmission? So here we go.
Yeah.
Really sci-fi, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, actually, we have to think of first, recording and stimulation, right? And for instance, Neuralink, BMI system, they have small hole in the skull, and they implant many electrodes, many soft electrodes, but I think it's very limited region, right? So in the motor cortex, and again, motor parameters can be low dimensional, so it's relatively easy to decode. But in vision, maybe we have to cover whole, to cover whole visual field. We have to, measure from very broad area in the visual cortex. So maybe for vision reconstruction or vision brain-to-brain communication, we have to have technology to cover very large portion of the brain. So, and I'm collaborating with neurosurgeons using ECOG, and ECOG can cover broad area. Right? So, but each channel signals is not as good as microelectrodes. So, but I think for vision reconstruction, ECOG method to cover large brain area may be promising. But for stimulation, I don't know. Yeah, maybe optogenetics or something may be applicable. But although I very simplified, we will eventually need the technology to control the dynamics of the brain activity given some external stimulation. Right? So, optogenetic or whatever stimulation just gives the initial condition. Right? So brain is dynamical. So, you have to have method to control the dynamics following the initial stimulation. So that's more challenging issue, I think.
Yeah, and you may hit some roadblocks with just between brain differences if you want to really transmit the same content, I imagine.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah.
There's another really interesting question from Celia, who asks, whether you encountered any subjects with aphantasia when you were decoding these imagined images. So if you can see individual differences in this decoding ability.
Yeah, that I'm very interested, but we tend to have very few subjects and extensively scanned. So far, although initially, some actually many subjects complain that how can I imagine? Yeah. So, but they get used to it. Right? But for me, it's difficult to imagine something on a blank screen. But if we screen the ability beforehand, and or if we find someone who cannot imagine at all, that would be interesting thing. But but so far we haven't systematically studied that aspect.
Right. But do you select only those people who self-report that they can imagine for those studies, or do you take everyone?
Actually, we didn't select subject based on that, so we just kept asking them to try. Yeah.
And after this many hours, I'm sure they improve.
Yeah, they just get used to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we can do maybe one more question. So there's a question from Emmanuel, and I'm going to try and rephrase it because I think it's a bit of a complex one. So I hope I'm doing it justice. If not, maybe Emmanuel, you can type in the chat and correct me. She says that the single image reconstruction implies that our phenomenological experience is one, and whether you have thought about expanding the mental complexity by setting the reconstruction on a small but larger than one set of 2D images, and whether that could de-overlap some aspects of dual or multiplexed mentation of the world.
Okay, so you mean, so if I understand correctly, it's so there are multiple representations in the brain at the same time, right? So
I think that's
that. Yeah. Okay. So actually, related to that, there's a study from Gerantries and the colleagues, and they were able to decode masked gratings orientation. So they presented grating but masked. So subjectively, they cannot perceive the grating, but from the brain you can decode the orientation of the invisible, grating. I think that's interesting. So although I emphasize that our mental experience is reconstructed, but by brain decoding you can decode something that does not reach consciousness. And for instance, we can reconstruct, for instance, in current screen, this kind of random image, right? And surprisingly, you can reconstruct this random image surprisingly well. Although, we cannot remember which part is, black and which part is white. Okay, and it's hard to distinguish these different random images. But from brain, we can, reconstruct exactly same image. Okay, so so there are so being able to decode does not mean it's consciously experienced. So it's interesting this question. And what kind of how our decodability and consciousness is related. Okay, and our attention study indicates that more consciously experienced image appears reconstructed more with higher contrast, but still the suppressed one may be represented somewhere. And if you look at some brain region, you can preferentially decode the suppressed image. That's possible. So
I guess her maybe more technical question is whether you ever tried to not just reconstruct one image at a time, but to reconstruct the two best ones to see if you can actually decode two representations simultaneously.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
So I think our question is whether you can try and reconstruct not just one best image at a given time, but actually try and reconstruct the two, like the best and the second best.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so yeah, currently our algorithm is just designed to give one, but that's interesting too. Yeah, and if you show images in succession within time, brief time period, maybe it's single brain sample may contain multiple images. So that's an interesting question.
All right, thank you. We're 50 minutes into the hour, so I think it would be great if everyone has time to take a short break, grab some coffee or tea, or depending on your time zone, something else, so that we can all come back in 10 minutes from now for the panel discussion, which will be moderated by Grace Lindsay, where there will be discussion with Christoph Koch, Yves Marder, Alessandro Travis, and Randall O'Reilly on what we can learn from computational models and their combination with neural data. So let's all thank Yuki again for a great and inspiring talk with many further points to think about, and see you for the next panel in 10 minutes. Thank you, Yuki.
Okay, thank you.